Hello there, and welcome to Alvarez's Diecast Customs. Today we're going to be taking a look at this 1965 Ford Mustang Fastback. In the previous video I said I was going to do something special with this one, so I've got a few plans for it. It's a nice looking little car, this one. It's one of Hot Wheels' main lines. I like the moulding on it, not too sure about the decals and the sort of paint finish to it. So let's get on with it. Take a closer look at him here. I've already taken the time to drill the posts out. Start off with a 2mm drill bit and then use the 5mm one to take the top of the post off. I use some 2mm times 5mm self-tapping screws and pop those into the hole and screw the base on. Just remove those now. Plastic base, plastic wheels. There's the interior. It's not too bad, that interior. Not much detail to it, but we can work with it. Clear plastic window. A bit scratched up as always. Even brand new out of the box, they're pretty scratched. There's that body. I'll just remove the wheels on this one. I use some side cutters and just clip away at the little retaining pieces of plastic that they put on them. You can sort of pull them out, but it leaves sort of the bits of plastic folded over and things, and it's just easier just to clip them off like this and have a flush finish to it. Makes it a bit easier for what I'm gonna do with it a bit later on. And they come out nice and easily. We'll just get on to stripping that paint. That's my pot of paint stripper. As always, looks questionable, but it does the job. Pop that in there, leave it for about 30 minutes. We run it under a water tap with a toothbrush and we scrub that off. So for some inspiration, we're going to go into my favorite game, Forza Horizon 4. And they've got the Hoonigans Hoonicorn car in there. I'm feeling I could do something with that, or at least sort of take some inspiration from the design of it. The actual car they use for the Ford Mustang Hoonigan car is a slightly different model. It's not the Fastback. It has a slightly different roof line and rear window, but it's pretty close. So what we're going to do in the game is just go into the paint options and give us a bit more of an easier sort of base to start off with, something we can look at to use for reference. We paint it in white, we can get a good idea of the angles and where we need to cut the lines and things for it. I find it easier to work with a 3D sort of model like that than just looking at photographs. So back to the model. This is after stripping it and running a wire wheel over it. Just going to use a Sharpie because we're going to need to remove some of the die-cast metal for some of the areas we're going to intend to do. So I'm just marking off around the wheel arches there. Those areas I'm going to have to flatten down and remove the arches. Do it on both sides. I'm going to use some diamond files to remove this. There we are, just start grinding away at it. This took forever. Just to get the lines right, really tidy them up. Just start working away at that. Go through a range of different size files with different angles to them, just to get all the sort of angles I needed to really get the finish on it. There you go. You can see I've removed the metal on those areas there. Try to get a really sharp line to it to make it easier to work with later on. we're going to be using some milliput. It's a 2-part epoxy sort of clay that we can use. We're going to really need to add quite a bit of material to these archways to start off with. I'm not going to be neat about it. I just need a good amount of material just to work with. We can roughly sort of put it on there, and then once it's hardened, we can start shaping it to what we need. So I cut up 2 sort of same size disc pieces of each of those epoxy sticks and just press them together. I work at kneading it for about 5 minutes as per the instructions. And just cut it into some easily usable sort of little bits, just so I'm not using way too much on each side. So we'll just start off with the front one here. Just gently sort of knead it to a sausage shape and stick it on there. Start pressing it in. At first it didn't quite want to stick, but eventually it just started to stick to the metal really well. It was very hard to actually get off once it had settled onto it. I use a little bit of water on my fingertips just to smooth some of the edges, just to make it a bit easier to work with, because it is quite tacky to your skin. There we go, just cutting some little bits up for the side vents on there. You can also see I went around the entire front area there, put a bit of a chin on the body there. What I also did is filed off these 2 sort of indicator lights on the bottom part of the front there. I really filed them off on the metal because they didn't have them on the Hoonicorn. So we need to do something about those plastic wheels because they're really not going to do the job. So we've gone to our goddess Super Pochaco again and see what she's got for us. Some new wheels here. Well, these look pretty good. Nice. Thanks for that. So there we go, that's all dried up. I left it for a day or 2 to harden up. So we're just test fitting those wheels first. Pop the interior in because they need to have the interiors on them to hold the wheels in. We'll just pop the body on there. You can see how the wheels foul on all that clay. So we're going to have to radius out those wheel arches to get them to fit neatly. So I used the half moon sort of shaped file and start really working into those archways. Just basically taking it back to the metal on the internal part. I also run a scalpel around just to really remove a lot of the material in there. It's my stupid grey hair getting in the way. Just chipping and cutting and sort of filing away at this. Never done this sort of thing before. Never used this material. So it's very much a learning process for me. Just using one of the files on the side of my cutting mat and just really sanding the body into it to get the line I wanted on the sides. And once I sort of got the width that I needed, I started to really chip away at the outer edges around the fenders. So after some considerable amount of time and dust everywhere, we ended up with this. See, I tried to sharpen up the edges quite nicely on there. Using the game as a reference point for getting those angles and shapes right really helped. You can see sort of in a 3D space just exactly what you are after. Just test fitting again. Test fitted multiple times throughout this whole build just to make sure the wheels weren't fouling and catching on things, making sure that it all looked correct. Just go over the entire thing now with a small piece of emery sanding paper. Just removing the remainder of all my fingerprints from the clay and everything. Just smoothing everything over. There we go, giving that a good clean up. And now it's on to building up a little spoiler for it. So I use a little piece of plastic card I've cut to roughly the shape I need. But it won't sit fully on there because the boot on this the edges go up slightly. So I'm taking a file to it, just cutting sort of like a V shape to each side of it, and there we go. It sits quite nicely now. Just grab some super glue, pop a blob on this, run the leading edge of the spoiler that I'm going to stick on through the glue. Use some nice pliers there just to give it a bit more control where I need it. Just pop it on the edge there. There's that. Going to use some Vallejo plastic putty just to fill in the gaps around that spoiler. We'll just use this scalpel. We'll just start putting it in there. And I feel like a dentist or something doing this. A very bad dentist, I'd imagine. Yes, so there we go, just filling in the little gaps around there. We let that dry for a while. And we go back at it with the emery cloth. Just run that away. Anyway, after all that work, I damn well needed a drink. So I'm just pouring one of my favourites out. So, cheers. Perfect. Back to work. So in order to fit the wheels in there, I've had to file out these areas where the axles go. Because what I'm going to do is use some brass rod and run the axles for the wheels through that, because there's too much play side to side on the wheels otherwise. And to hold them in place with a bit more width to them, I'm going to run them through an axle. So what I do is just get some little brass rod that fits the axles inside. I cut it using the scalpel, just rolling the scalpel over it on the cutting mat, and it cuts through very easily. Very nice, clean line to it. If you use like a pair of side cutters, you end up crunching them. I also just primed the body there. Did that off camera, nothing special. Just use that Halfords primer. Now I've made a little sort of rear sort of scoop thing that they stick on the back of the car. I can't remember the name of it offhand. But as you can see, I used some plastic card and some Tamiya fine cement there. Glued that all up. It's going to stick on the bottom there. So what we're going to do is paint this in Ford Ocean Blue from the Halfords range again. Ironically, this is actually the same paint I used for my real car. So I just had a can in the cupboard and I was like, well, may as well use this one, see how that one comes out on one of these. And being it's a Ford colour, going on a Ford Mustang, I thought that might go quite well. I didn't want to be sort of over the top. Didn't want any sort of racing stripes and things. I just wanted a really simple looking model to it. I also went over the chassis and the interior with some aluminium Humbrol spray, again off camera. I used some little bits of blue tack to stick on the end of those axles to prevent them getting clogged up with paint. So we're just painting the seats and on the interior there with some Revell matte black. Also did the steering wheel and the dashboard. Now on the chassis, we're just going to use some Tamiya metallic grey. Just go around picking out some of the smaller details, the differentials and drive shafts and whatnot there. And also some Revell silver, just picking out the exhaust pipe, just brightening that up a bit more to make it stand out. There's that done. We're going to use some Citadel Nylon oil. This is a shade colour. Really brings out a lot of depth in the details when you start putting this on. Just apply that quite heavily to the entirety of that chassis. As you can see, it sort of clings to the edges and the depths of it. There we go. We'll also do the same to the interior as well. There's that. I'm going to make a little roll cage as well. So what I'm using is some lead-free solder because it's quite stiff and thick, and it holds its shape quite well after you've bent it. And it's very easy to work with, cuts very easily with just a scalpel. So you can see I've already made one ahead of time. Just a dab of super glue on the upper part to hold it there. And then we're just going to glue that in. So we can start putting the thing together now. I also painted those wheels white. Wasn't feeling the silver on them too much. I wanted them a bit more like the Hoonicorn with nice bright white wheels. I used some Tamiya white for that. There's that interior with that roll cage glued in. There's that windscreen. Just pop that in there. As you can see, I had to make a little hole in the rear black thing that I made, just so I could get the screw through it. Anyway, before I reveal it, let's go back to what we started with. It's a great looking little Mustang, this one. Had a lot of potential for what I wanted to do with it. As I said previously, wasn't really feeling the decals on it either. Anyway, here we ended up with my own custom Hoonicorn. Never done anything like this before. It's way out of sort of what anything I've done previously. I've usually just done sort of repaints and things, but I've added quite a bit to this one. Even working with plastic art, never done that before. So let's take a closer look at it. As you can see, it still rolls quite nicely on them new wheels, even with those little axles. Blue paint came out great. This was after 2 coats of clear coat as well. I always love to clear coat my cars. Sort of really seals everything in. There's the added details on the rear there. Uses some Tamiya clear red for the rear tail lights. Also went around the windows and the door frame sort of areas with some black, just to pick out the rubbers on them. Little bit of detail in the front there. Not over the top. I wanted it sort of more simplified. I wanted the sort of body lines to be the main focal point rather than anything else. There's that chassis. Yeah, really happy with this one. Really happy with how this one turned out, with the stance of it. It sits really nicely, and it's exactly sort of what I was after doing. I don't know how long it'll be before I attempt something like this again, but I've had fun. So I'd just like to thank all my new subscribers that I've picked up, and the comments that I've been getting. So they're all really positive. It's not really anything I've done like this before. I'm not really much of a YouTuber or anything. I just have a lot of hobbies, and this is one of many. It's just something that I'd like to share with everyone. So yeah, really appreciate all the nice comments and the subscribers that I've been getting. Thanks a lot. Just go take a look at Super Pochaco again. Maybe she's got something for us next time. Oh, what's that? Interesting. That's not a muscle car. What you playing at? The 32 Ford Hot Rod. Well, this is going to be a bit different. Nice. Anyway, thanks for now, and hopefully I'll see you next time.